Your throat is tightening, your eyes are filling, and this feeling doesn't even belong to you, it's coming from someone else's pain. The modern world tells you everyone has their own problems, don't carry other people's burdens, put yourself first. But for 300,000 years, the opposite was true. The human who couldn't feel another's pain was cast out from the tribe, because without empathy, the group fell apart, and that feeling is still in you, in every crying face, in every broken voice. There is someone sitting across from you. You don't know exactly what happened to them. You have the outline, enough to understand that something broke, or was taken, or didn't go the way it was supposed to. The details don't matter as much as the fact that you can see it on their face, the particular quality of stillness that isn't peace, the eyes that are present but not quite here. And something in you, before you decide anything, before you choose how to respond, before you even fully register what you're seeing, something moves. Not metaphorically, physically, something shifts in your chest, your throat does a thing, the muscles around your eyes change their tension in a way you didn't authorize. You are feeling something that is not yours. Most people, when they notice this happening, do one of two things. They lean into it and spend the next hour carrying the weight of someone else's experience so completely that they come home depleted, unable to explain to anyone why they are so tired from a conversation they weren't even the subject of. Or they learn over time to manage the response, to create a slight internal distance, to be present and caring and supportive while keeping a careful wall between their nervous system and the other person's pain. Professionals learn this. Therapists, doctors, social workers, they have to, or the work destroys them. Both of these responses make sense. Both of them are navigating something real, but neither of them is the beginning of the story. The beginning of the story is why the response exists at all, why your nervous system is built to feel what the person across from you is feeling, involuntarily, automatically, before you can decide whether you want to or not. That answer goes back much further than the modern world has ever told you. Here is what we have been told about empathy, that it is a virtue, that it is the mark of emotional maturity, of psychological development, of a person who has done the work of becoming genuinely open to others. That empathy is something you cultivate through practice, through intention, through the deliberate effort to imagine your way into another person's experience. This is not wrong. Empathy can be deepened through practice. The capacity can be developed, but the foundation of it, the involuntary, automatic, preconscious response that fires before you decide anything, that is not a virtue, that is hardware. In the early 1990s, a team of neuroscientists in Parma, Italy, led by Giacomo Rizzolatti, made a discovery that they almost didn't recognize as significant. They were studying the motor cortex of macaque monkeys, specifically neurons that fired when the monkeys reached for food, routine work, the kind of painstaking observation that fills most of a researcher's actual career without producing anything that anyone outside the field would ever hear about. And then something happened that shouldn't have happened. A neuron fired in a monkey that was sitting still, not reaching for anything, when that monkey watched a researcher reach for food instead. The monkey's brain produced the same neural signal for watching an action as it did for performing that action. These neurons, which the team eventually called mirror neurons, were not a quirk of macaque anatomy. Subsequent research found evidence of similar systems in humans. The same principle, your brain, watching another person experience something, produces neural activity that mirrors what would happen if you were experiencing it yourself. Not imagining it, not processing it abstractly, simulating it, running the experience in your own neural architecture as if it were happening to you. This is why your throat tightens when someone else cries. Your brain is not merely observing their distress and generating a sympathetic response. It is, at some level, running the distress itself, producing the internal simulation of what it feels like to be in that state. You don't choose to feel what they're feeling. Your brain constructs the experience automatically before you get a vote. Now I want to take you somewhere specific, not a lab in Italy, much older than that. Imagine a group of 30 people moving across open terrain. It's late in the dry season. The water sources they've been navigating toward have been smaller than expected. The hunting has been unreliable. The group has been moving longer than it planned, covering more ground than its youngest and oldest members can sustain comfortably. And one of them, a woman, let's say, who has been hunting alongside the group for 15 years, who knows every face in the circle, who has been reliable in the way that only someone tested repeatedly by hard seasons can be, begins to fall behind, not dramatically, not collapsing, just slower than yesterday, her gait slightly different, something in her face that the people who know her recognize before she says anything. What happens next is not a decision. The people nearest to her don't convene and assess. They don't calculate whether her slowing down is a net cost to the group's survival probability. They don't hold a meeting. They slow down. Some of them drop back. One adjusts the distribution of what they're carrying. Someone offers water. The group, without a formal conversation about it, reorganizes itself around the fact that one of its members is struggling. This isn't altruism in the philosophical sense. This isn't a moral choice. This is empathy functioning as coordination technology. Because here is what the group's survival actually required, not in theory, but in practice, across hundreds of thousands of years of the specific environment that shaped us. It required that the people in it could detect each other's states accurately, not eventually, not after one explained what was happening. Before that, the moment the gate changed, before anyone said anything, the nearest members of the group needed to register. Something is different. This person needs something. The configuration needs to adjust. Empathy wasn't the thing that made early humans kind. It was the thing that made them functional as a group. The distinction matters, because one of those framings makes empathy a virtue, something admirable, something to aspire to, and the other makes something closer to a sense, like hearing, like the ability to smell smoke before you see fire, a capacity so fundamental to how the group operated that losing it wasn't a moral failure. It was a functional one. There is a piece of archaeological evidence that I keep returning to when I think about ancient human empathy, not because it is the most dramatic, but because it is the most quiet. In 2017, researchers studying burial sites from the Middle Paleolithic, sites associated with Neanderthals, not modern humans, documented something that has since been confirmed across multiple locations in Europe and the Middle East: deliberate burial, with care, with positioning. In some cases, with grave goods. Now, the debate about what Neanderthal burial practices mean has been ongoing for decades, and there are genuine disagreements among researchers about the extent and intentionality. But what the accumulating evidence suggests, carefully, with appropriate certainty, is this: at least some of the humans who preceded us, in the hundreds of thousands of years before modern Homo sapiens, were doing something with their dead that goes beyond disposal. They were, in some form, marking the loss. Think about what that requires. Not the physical act of burial, the internal state that makes the physical act meaningful, the recognition that the person who was here is now gone, and that this fact is significant enough to warrant an action, that the absence is something to be acknowledged rather than simply moved on from. That is grief. And grief is empathy extended across time, the ongoing registration of another person's absence as a loss that belongs to you even after they are no longer present to feel it. The capacity that makes your throat tighten when someone cries in front of you today is the same capacity that made a Neanderthal place something carefully beside a body in the dark of a cave 100,000 years ago. It is that old. It is that deep. Now here is where this becomes something more than history. There is a researcher named Jean Decety at the University of Chicago who has spent decades studying the neuroscience of empathy, specifically what happens in the brain when we witness someone else in pain. His findings, replicated across multiple studies and populations, point to something that is by now well established in the literature, but almost never makes it into popular conversation. The regions of the brain that activate when you are in physical pain activate, partially, measurably, consistently, when you watch someone else experience physical pain. Not as intensely, not identically, but the overlap is real, and it is not learned. It is present in children before they have been taught anything about compassion or kindness or moral obligation. It appears to be a baseline feature of the human nervous system, the foundation on which everything we later call empathy is built. What this means is that when you feel something in response to another person's pain, you are not performing emotion. You are not being manipulated by your feelings into an irrational response. You are receiving real information about another person's state through the most accurate sensing system your brain has for reading other humans. Their pain is producing a signal, Your nervous system is receiving it. The response you feel is the result of that transmission. The modern world has spent considerable effort teaching us to manage this signal, to not let it overwhelm us, to maintain professional distance, personal boundaries, emotional regulation. And there are contexts where this is genuinely necessary, where the signal would be so constant and so intense that functioning without some form of management would be impossible. But somewhere in the management, something else happened. We started treating the signal itself as a problem. The person who feels too much became someone who needs to toughen up. The person who cries at others' pain became someone who is too sensitive, too emotional, too easily affected. The capacity that kept the group intact across hundreds of thousands of years of shared hardship became a liability to be managed rather than a feature to be understood. Here is what I want you to take from this. The response you have, the throat that tightens, the eyes that fill, the chest that does something you didn't authorize, that is not a malfunction. It is not evidence that you are too sensitive or insufficiently boundaried or emotionally dysregulated. It is a sensing system, the oldest and most accurate sensing system your species ever developed for reading the people around you. It kept a woman from being left behind in the dry season. It kept a group from missing the moment when one of its members was struggling. It put something carefully but a body in the dark of a cave before humans had language for what they were doing or why. It is not a flaw in your design. It is the design. I'm not telling you to dissolve every boundary and absorb every person's pain without limit. The modern world is large and loud and full of suffering, and your nervous system was calibrated for a group of 30 people, not for the thousands stories of pain you encounter in a single morning on your phone. The management is sometimes genuinely necessary, but I am telling you this. The next time you feel something that isn't yours, the next time your throat tightens watching a stranger, the next time a sound in someone's voice produces a physical response in you before you've consciously registered what you're hearing, don't dismiss it. Don't apologize for it. Don't file it as evidence of a weakness you are still working on. Recognize it for what it is. The woman who fell behind in the dry season didn't have to ask for help. The people nearest to her felt the change before she said anything. Their nervous systems received the signal her body was sending and produced a response before any of them had made a decision. That is what you are. That is what the tightening throat and the filling eyes are trying to be in a world that has made it very hard to know who is really in your group and very easy to be overwhelmed by the signals of people who are technically strangers. The capacity is real. The signal is real. The question the modern world has never adequately answered is simply, who are your 30 people? Find them, stay close to them. Let your nervous system do what it was built to do, in the circle it was built to do it in. The feeling that isn't yours is still telling you something true. You're still here. See you in the next one.